to the fullest. Sounds great, doesn't it? But what does it mean? And how do we get it? Let's talk about it with Matt Hurd on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
That's the name of the program, and we are so glad you're here. I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter, our executive producer, is here. Matthew never believed in the concept of purgatory. And then this past week, he hosted a birthday party with a dozen screaming 8-year-old girls. And before we went on the air, he was yawning and stretching and had a pained look on his face.
Still getting over it.
Oh, we know why.
And he has been confessing a lot.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
We just don't want that to happen again.
Our producer, Jim, by the way, Kathy says that Stephanie, Matthew's wife, is a party animal. And with so many children, you have so many parties. Mm-hmm. And it's because you offended a magician when you were little, and it's your curse. Our producer, Jinx, is in his little glass booth. Jinx helps me sound good, though, to be perfectly honest, God did most of the heavy lifting on that one. And then our video director and one-man IT department, John Myers, is in his tech bunker. They haven't thought up a computer problem that John can't fix, but we keep trying. And George Bingham is the president, Dr. George Bingham, of Key Life, one of the few with the spiritual gift of a great beard. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of the program. Kathy, a belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
Did you have a good one?
Well, you know, when you get to be my age, you're just grateful to have them, whatever predicament they come to you in. That was a terrible sentence. Dangling.
You're craving for finals.
Yeah,
birthdays are a gift. Up to that point.
Yes, go for it. Take what you can get.
By the way, we have a great guest today. Matt Hurd is my friend. He's a preacher, a speaker, a teacher, a writer, a pastor, a coach. Probably knows as much about what's going on in the church in America and around the world as anybody that I know. He is the founder and principal of a ministry called Thrive. And we'll say something about it. Matt has also served as lead pastor at Northland Church in Orlando, president of the Gathering USA, and senior pastor of Woodman Valley Chapel in Colorado Springs. His book, and I'd show it to you, but it's on my Kindle, and it doesn't look very pretty when you show a Kindle on. Oh, we got it. So Matthew has it. And the name of the book, and Matthew holds that book in his formerly never nicotine-stained fingers. The book is Life with a capital L, Embracing Your God-Given Humanity. Matt, thanks for being with us.
I am delighted to be here. Thanks, Steve. It's good to be with you guys.
You know, when we were talking earlier about this program and its theme, Life to the Fullest, it had a kind of feel of some kind of speaker, motivational, who uses cliches all the time and makes people feel good until they get out the door and get hit by a truck. And then as we looked at this book and at what you've been teaching, we saw that it's nothing like any of that. Thank heavens. So you're not going to say you can be rich, you can be famous, and you will deserve both. Repeat after me. That's not where you're coming from. You use a phrase, there's life everywhere. What do you mean by that?
That is from a painting that I saw in Russia a number of years ago. It's the title of the painting, and the artist is Nikolai Yeroshenko. It was in 1888. And I was, this whole concept of life and life to the full from John 10:10 has gotten a bad rap because it gets hijacked by the very people that I think you're talking about, where it's say, hey, trust Jesus and everything's going to be fine. And so that was in the back of my mind. I was kind of hustling through this art gallery and saw that painting, and it's of 5 prisoners. It looked like prisoners. It was a mother and a child and a farmer and a soldier and a peasant. And they're in a prison rail car stopped, and the little child is feeding birds on the railway platform. And it just struck me as the only painting on the wall. And I looked over and at the title, and it says, "There is life everywhere." And I thought, well, that's a fascinating title, given that, I've got this proclivity to notice those references to life. So I looked it up. The benefit of having a smartphone in an art gallery is you can do quick research. And Yeroshenko was impacted by a short story by Leo Tolstoy. I didn't know Tolstoy had written anything short, but I looked up what was that, because they were contemporaries. And the short story, it's really an essay called What Men Live By. So I looked that up in the gallery. And it starts with a reference to 1 John 3:14 that talks about when we're truly loving, and it's this notion that we're representing that we've moved from death to life. So immediately I'm realizing Yeroshenko is talking about the life of the gospel, because I was curious if he was saying there's life everywhere, kind of this, hey, put a little dandelion in the ear and call it a day and just pretend everything's all right and say it's not hot and it's not here and just deny. That's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying, look at the bright side. He was actually saying there's the ability to engage with the life of God in every situation, no matter how fallen. And here they're headed on a train to Siberia. So that's where that phrase comes from.
That is so cool. It really is. And it's often certainly not the experience of most Christians. Life is everywhere outside of the church. Boredom is everywhere within the church. And what you're saying, I assume, is that ought to be reversed. They're using the church as a metaphor in this sense, but that Christians ought to be different in that they live life to the fullest with a capital L.
Yeah. I mean, I hesitated to use that title. I mean, I love the phrase, but it comes out of just immersing in John's gospel, where he, in his gospel, the epistles, Revelation, over 70 times he uses the word life, but only about 15 refer to heart beating, lung breathing. That's that bios and suke are the 2 Greek words. The word that he uses is zoe. And so I love life with a capital L, the phrase, but I don't like it because of what you said earlier, is that people will assume, hey, and it's always smiles. And you know what? That life with a capital L can happen with tears streaming down your face when you're being honest about the brokenness, as well as the delight and the joy. So, but yeah, I think that Christians, we model something very, very different.
And Jesus is not trying to make us rich and healthy and to have everything we want, nor is he trying to make us more religious. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, John 16, he says, in this world, you will have trouble, and take heart, I've overcome the world. So I think I did a little research in the Greek there, and he means in this world, you will have trouble. And there's no way around it. He says, but we can take heart in the midst of it.
How do people resonate with this? Surprise, anger, like you're crazy? Don't you understand that Christians go through hell to get to heaven, and pagans go through heaven to get to hell? Do people resonate with this message?
You know what? More and more, because it's especially even in these last couple of years, I think that the pandemic has been Toto. COVID has been Toto, and the pandemic has been awful. But Toto and the Wizard of Oz, young little dog that goes up at the end of the movie and grabs the curtain and trots back and reveals the wizard for who he really was. And I think that some of that has been happening within the church, and it's resonating with people because we've gotten into the realm of methodology in the church is the hope, and let's just do it right, as opposed to things like orthodoxy and vibrancy being our hope. And so that's kind of where I started. John 20:31 is probably the baseline. And I don't even really talk about it in the book, because as I was speaking and hearing who resonated, who didn't with this message, that part A, part B that we talked about, orthodoxy and vibrancy. So I'll let that be a teaser, and maybe we can unpack that a little bit further.
And on the other side of the break, Matt is going to teach us how to find life to the fullest, even when you've got cancer and your wife just told you she didn't love you. You don't want to miss a bit of this. The book is Life with a capital L, Embracing Your God-Given Humanity. And our humanity may be something different than what you think. Hey, like Jesus, we're coming back and hope you do too. We're talking to Matt Hurd in his book, and the title is a wonderful title, but it'll confuse you because you'll think of motivational speakers and cliches when you read the title. And that book is not about that, nor is the message of Thrive, for which Matt is the primary spokesman. I'm going to give you some information a little bit later on, and then you can check it out, because there's some exciting stuff here. Man, it's exactly, you use a German word. It's Sehnsucht. Would you tell us how to pronounce it and then tell us what it is?
Sure. Sehnsucht is how to pronounce it as best as I can get. I will speak about once a year in Austria, a lot of German students, and I'll use that. So they've helped me with the pronunciation of it. But I actually learned the term through C.S. Lewis, what it means is longing, deep hunger, yearning, longing, thirst. And Lewis talked about how his Sehnsucht, and we all have it. Every image bearer has this eternity embedded in our hearts, and it's a deep longing, and it's not a longing to be an NBA basketball player, a concert pianist, or to be owner of a restaurant. It's longing for things like significance and intimacy and goodness and truth and beauty and resolution and justice. And the list goes on. And we all have those. You don't hear them talked about a lot in church, but Hollywood knows the list well, because any movie that's grabbed us is keying in on a lot of those longings for belonging, for a sense of the whole justice longing is there. Well, Lewis, he said from when he was a little kid, his Sehnsucht was there, his longing for something more. He says the first recollection he had was when they moved outside of to this new home. Little Lee is the name of the home. A lot of C.S. Lewis fans will know. And he remembers when he was 6 years old, standing outside. They moved out basically into the suburbs, and he was looking at the distance at the Castlereagh Hills and saying, my word's not his, but those hills, evoked something in him that they would not satisfy. And he said throughout his journey, this from leaving the church, going into atheism and dealing with the occult and sensuality, and then coming out of that into deism, theism, and then ultimately becoming a follower of Jesus. And in that process, saying he was the most reluctant convert in all of England. He said the thing that was consistent is his Sehnsucht, his longing. And it's that thirst that the woman at the well had, where Jesus says, you know, what you're thirsty for, you're not going to get in what you've been up to. And so, you know, a lot of people, especially in our culture now, they're not waking up asking, how can I get to heaven and be forgiven of my sins? But they are waking up to say, how can I thrive as a human being? How can I address these longings? But we all have the same longings. Different ones of us are emphasizing one longing more than the other. Where we differ is what we're doing to satisfy them. And so that's, I think, what is pinpointed in the gospel. What Jesus is putting his finger on is not, hey, do you want to be religious? But hey, do you want your thirst addressed? And make sure you understand what you're thirsty for is something that's eternal. It's living water.
I remember reading that in the book and connecting with it and thinking, oh, you know, there's some religions that say suffering is rooted in desire and longing. And so, you know, the best thing you could do is be free of desire. And I always wanted to meet somebody who believed that and go, wow, that'd be really great. You must really want that. And then just watch their head implode. But even if somebody could divorce the longing of themselves from their hearts, it would make them something less than human. They would be missing out on and that connects to this incredible line that you have in the book. And I would love for you to tell us what this means. It says, bottom line, Jesus is not about making us super spiritual, but fully human. That just radiates off the page. What in the world does that mean?
You know, the first time, Matthew, I heard something similar to that was when I was in college. I studied with Francis Schaeffer over in L'Abri. It was in the last couple of years of his life. And one of his associates had passed away a few years before. His name was Hans Roetmacher. He was an art historian, a Dutch art historian. And so he turned me on to some of his writings. And one of the things Roetmacher said is Jesus didn't came to make us Christian. He came to make us fully human. And it resonated with me, scares religious people to death. But I think it's at the core of, you know, what Jesus came to do. This whole notion that we're to become less human. And I think there are a lot of Christian circles. The more you follow Jesus, the less human you'll be. And in fact, that embracing your God-given humanity subtitle, I've gotten some flack over that. People say, I don't want to be more fully human. I want to be like Jesus. And thinking, well, there's a little bit of church history that would question that, because what you're saying is that Jesus wasn't fully human. He was the most fully human person to walk on the face of this planet since Adam and Eve before the fall, and obviously different in the sense that he was fully God. So that whole notion of separating our spirituality and our humanity and saying, you know, if the spirituality is going up, the humanity is going down, and if the humanity is going up, the spirituality is going down. I think that could not be further from the truth. You know, Irenaeus, Jesus discipled John. John discipled a guy named Polycarp. Polycarp discipled a guy named Irenaeus. And in the 2nd century, he wrote this treatise called Against Heresies. And it's about Gnosticism. It's about people saying physicality is bad, materialism, suppress it. And he's the guy that said the glory of God is man fully alive. And when God's most glorified, when we are being what we were originally created to be. And so that whole notion of the more spiritual I am, the more fully human I can be is what the scriptures teach, not the opposite.
You'll find, and I'm sure you have, that there are those who doubt your salvation. Yep. If you're not properly religious and serious the way you're supposed to be. This is a dangerous place to walk because of the freedom that it gives us to be human.
Yeah. And, But the more fully human I am, it's not the more fully human according to my preferences. It's the more fully human according to his design. And I think keeping that in mind, that, I want to be like Jesus. I think we all do. But Jesus in Matthew is going to look different than Jesus in George, than Kathy, than Jinx and Steve or Matt. But bottom line, it's who he's calling us to be. Follow me, and I will restore you into the purpose you were originally created for.
Oh, man. More of that coming up on the other side of the break. Matt, do you have a website yet?
Yeah. ThriveFullyAlive.com. All
right. ThriveFullyAlive.com. You ought to go there and you can find some more about that, because we're only going to scratch the surface. This is important stuff. More important stuff when we come back. Hey, thanks for joining us. You always have a seat at our table. We're hanging out with Matt Hurd. You can keep up with him at the website that he'll give you again, but you can also do it at matt-hurd.org or on Twitter and Instagram at Matt B. Hurd.
By the way, don't put a dash in there, Steve. Yeah. I'm not sure where that'll take you. It's just matthurd.org.
Oh, it looked like it, but
all one name or all one word.
It looked like a dash to me. I think the better one is a pipe tobacco that got on the script.
And the other one, Matt, you were about to say?
The other one's ThriveFullyAlive.com.
Okay. We sort of started a discussion. You started a discussion earlier talking about the terms orthodoxy and vibrancy. And that, maybe you could pick up on that. And that actually would sort of tease a blog that you're doing that's going to end up on keylife.org.
Sure. I mean, it came out, George, of talking about the book and wanting to make sure we understand the gospel rootedness of it and the substance of it. And it keys in on John making a statement at the end of his gospel, chapter 20, verse 31. He says, I could have included a lot of other things, but these things have been written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And so he says, the Holy Spirit has led me to write this gospel for two reasons. One, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah. I call that purpose A or part A. And two is that by believing you may have life in his name. And I call part A orthodoxy and part B vibrancy. So it's orthodoxy, believing in Jesus Messiah, but it's also vibrancy, that by believing you may have life in his name. And such, I mean, Steve, you asked earlier about, the response of people, especially in younger, the 20-somethings, they track with this immediately because so many of them are being tempted to give up on the orthodoxy because they don't see any vibrancy in the church. I mean, the older generation, we get real concerned about the lack of orthodoxy. And yes, that's a huge concern. But the orthodoxy, believing in Jesus Messiah, should lead to vibrancy. It's not just understanding the doctrine. It's being able to participate in the dance, so to speak. It's lyrics and music. The orthodoxy is lyrics, and the vibrancy is the music, and the two go together. And I think that's what made Jesus so attractive. And it's, there have been movements, George, where people have said they sense the lack of vibrancy, the lack of life, but they bypassed orthodoxy. Well, it's not either or; it's both and it's us figuring out what does it look like to deeply believe, but also to deeply live to his glory, and let that orthodoxy flesh itself out, not just on Sunday mornings, but in the way that we do our lives.
Matt, I'm very confused.
You know what? We all are, Kathy.
Not me. I'm ordained.
Yeah, you're ordained, so you're fine. When you grow up when you're old and you've spent your entire life in the church, you've grown up in the church in a very, I hate to use the words, but very fundamental, evangelical churches. And you read your statement where you say, bottom line, Jesus is not about making us super spiritual, but fully human. It's like that just almost like says, take everything that you learned your entire lifetime about wanting to be more and more like Jesus in every way, every day, and being spiritual. And, that's how we tell if people really love Jesus, because they get more and more spiritual. So what do we get wrong if we decide to consider the idea of our humanity? Am I making any sense at all? Because sure. I'm where do we go with this?
Yeah. Well, we've confused what spirituality, I think, is. It's not an absence. The spirituality happens within our humanity. So there's a statement that you made. I don't know if this will be helpful, but equating the being super spiritual. Wait a minute. I thought we were supposed to be like Jesus, not fully human. And understanding those are one and the same. To be fully human is to be like Jesus. It's for his life to be manifest in us. Crucified with Christ is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. Well, how's he going to manifest himself? How's his spirit manifest himself through us? By being super spiritual and removed from the world in the ascetic sense, or is it us being clothed with our humanity? He clothes himself with our humanity, and he expresses himself through us in the lives of other people. But so I think it's that dichotomy of secular and sacred that gets us in trouble. We're going to be sacred over here. That means we can't be involved in the things of the world. Depends on what the things of the world are you're talking about. I grew up in Alabama, so the phrase we use is, am I scratching where you're itching? So you got to think about that, Kathy, and get back to me.
And he is where we all itch, because the itch was created by God. We were created for him.
Absolutely.
The desires he embedded in us, the longings, and our hearts, as somebody has said, are restless until they find their rest in him. We're going to come back. You too. Hey, you're listening to Steve Brown, etc., and we're so glad you're here. We're looking at Christianity from what seems like a kind of skewed perspective. Matt Hurd, who's our guest, and by the way, his book is Life with a capital L, Embracing Your God-Given Humanity. And Matt is saying some things that don't seem really Christian. They kind of bust what we've been trying so hard to do. And Matt says, quit it. There's a different call for this. And his blog, by the time this is up on YouTube and on the radio stations around the country, his blog will be at keylife.org, and you can get some more information there and some links also. Matt has got it. In fact, he's right, and it could change the world.
Matt, while we were talking during the segment, during the commercial break, I love statements that are very counterintuitive, but when you explore them further, you realize that's that's the gospel. That's biblical truth. And one of those that you threw out when we were just talking really grabbed me, which was Jesus did not come to make disciples. How in the world can you back that up?
So man, you got to watch it, Matthew. Matthew, he'll take stuff out of context. Steve, have you noticed that? Every now and then, that's just part of the statement. But no, it's true. I said his ultimate mission was not coming to make disciples, and his ultimate. He couldn't have been more clear in John 10:10. He says, the thief comes to steal and to kill and destroy. That's a direct reference all the way back to the garden. And he's inviting us into this redemptive story that's not just 2 chapters of the first chapter being the fall and the second chapter being redemption. He's inviting us this plot of 4 chapters that started in creation and goes to, then the fall, then redemption, and this restoration into a new creation. So he's saying the thief came to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come to reverse that. I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. And the word that he uses there is the same word that he uses in Ephesians 1:7, where he talks about it's persuo, this extravagant, lavish grace. And so he says, I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. It's not happy clappy. It's not this wealth and health business, but it is restoring you back to be fully alive with the Zoe of my Father, the life of my Father. Now, his strategy was go make disciples. But we confuse, if we say his discipleship was its ultimate mission, all of a sudden you get people that are just going through a methodology, not realizing the purpose of it. And the purpose of discipleship is, as Irenaeus said, I mentioned it early in the program, that we might be fully alive to God's glory, not fully alive for our own fulfillment, even though our fulfillment will happen. Jesus didn't come to say, hey, how can I help you? He came to beckon me, to bow the knee, to submit my life, but in doing so, to become like him. And my humanity is not a bad thing. And so that's what I meant by that. And it's to me, it's transformational and transformative to say discipleship is a strategy. What's the end result? The end result is not just having X number of 5 times and going to church this amount of time and sharing my faith this amount of time. It's all of those things. None of them are bad. Depends on if we get into the legalism thing, which would be a really fun discussion in this context. But they're leading to something. Let's be full. We're the new humanity as the church. We're the people that have been made alive. Everybody else has the bios, the suke, the lung-breathing, heart-beating life, but we're dead in our transgressions and sins. And what does Paul say? He says, but he's made us alive. And it's amazing how the enemy has come along and turned religious people into sour killjoys, thinking that they are getting the smile of God. And when the smile has already come to us through Jesus.
Man, go ahead, George.
Oh, I was just going to say, so you're saying I don't have to have a quiet time every day and don't have to read through the Bible once every year and so forth. That's a relief.
We're just getting a D- on this show.
Oh, yeah. Again, yes. So I tell you what, if you miss a day, you're okay. Yeah, we want to absorb the word of God. But what does Jesus tell the rebukes the Pharisees in John 5, verse 39? It's a rebuke that starts with this: you search the scriptures. Hello, I thought that was a good thing. And he's not saying that's bad, but he says, but you refuse to let the scriptures, the whole purpose of the scriptures is to lead you to me. And he finishes that verse with, you refuse to allow those scriptures to lead you to me, to find my life. He says, life is in me, and the scriptures are meant to lead you to back to the Zoe that I came to bring. So it's not me doing devotions, but communing with him. And the only time he defines eternal life is in John 17:3. And he says, and this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God and the one that you sent. So eternal life, this Zoe, this fullness of life, his intimacy with the Father, but not in a religious doing, but in a living all of my life in his presence, under his authority, to his glory.
We have about a minute left. Let's assume we all buy into it. Everybody who's watching and listening, and us. What would that look like? Maybe as opposed to where we are now.
I think it's changing some of the definition of what does a healthy Christian look like. It's not just somebody who agrees with a doctrinal statement and ascribes to a subcultural behavioral code of their religious community, but it's people that are fully alive together. That's tears and laughter. It's not one or the other, but it's authentically engaging with a sense of awe daily, embracing my brokenness, being creative according to God's imaging of me, being a person of depth, engaging my culture with justice and life and evangelism, walking in fellowship and community with the people around me, being generous and having an awakened heart. And not just following Jesus with my mind, but also my heart, walking in intimacy, participating in a journey. I think, Steve, what it would look like is us engaging with Jesus, not only as way and truth, but also life. And way and truth is easier, but the life is what the whole purpose is.
Oh, such good stuff. Matt, appreciate you taking your time out of a busy schedule to be with us. This hour went quickly. His book, you can read about this in more detail. You can check it out on his website. It's Life with a capital L, Embracing Your God-Given Humanity. And as we've learned, that may look a lot different than you think it will look. Hey guys, we're gonna come back even if you don't want us to, and we're gonna tell you who we're gonna do it unto next week. So sit there, don't move until we sell product, and we'll come back. You've been listening to Steve Brown, etc., and thanks for hanging out with us. By the way, on our YouTube channel, we're now closing in on 1 million subscribers. We're just 994,531 more to go.
Wow.
Will you help us hit that goal? You can go to youtube.com, Key Life Network, and hit subscribe, and you will automatically get 3 free sins for having done it. I love sitting down and talk to Matt because he not only teaches it, he lives it. And in his presence, you kind of feel like this is good and this is right. And this is why we were created. And we really are. I think we've turned so religious that we smell, and we don't smell like Jesus. We've turned so religious, we smell like something that was left in your refrigerator too long. That's called the frozen chosen. And Matt's message and ours too, they come together, a message of God's grace. God didn't create you to be religious and more spiritual. He created you to be like Jesus. And that doesn't mean you wear sandals and let your hair grow if you've got it. It means if you want to. Laughter, unless you want to look like Jinx. And it means being free, being human, being real, being alive. And the best part is that it never stops throughout eternity. So get Matt's book and read it, or check out his website. His website's not fully up, so they're working on it, but you can get some information there and then watch it as he begins to fill it in. Kathy, who's going to be with us next week?
Well, interestingly, a while back, we interviewed a guy. His name is Caleb Kaltenbach, and we really liked him a lot. His book was titled Messy Grace, and he has a new book out now called Messy Truth. I mean, I guess the messy part was successful, so he thought he'd stay with something that works. But Messy Truth, and the subtitle is How to Foster Community Without Sacrificing Conviction. And Caleb has a very, very interesting background that shows how he's a perfect example of somebody who comes from a difficult situation and has to learn, how to do that.
And boy, do we need that message, man. We're all losing friends because of convictions, and it doesn't have to work that way. Well, you don't want to miss next week. We're going to be here at the same time, same place, and it's our fond hope that you'll join us once again. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't, and that gives you a wide, wide berth.